We're back 2 days to go before the South Carolina primary, and today Newt Gingrich's second wife, Mary Ann, broke her 13-year silence about their marriage, revealing that Gingrich asked her for what she called an open marriage arrangement so that he could see other women. Joining me right now is someone who has lived through a similar situation, you might say, and who has firsthand knowledge about South Carolina politics. Jenny Sanford, the former First Lady of the state, who actually managed her former husband's campaigns and was also the author of the book, Staying True. Mrs. Sanford, thanks for joining us tonight. And I guess I have to use you tonight as a political pundit, if you will. How do you see that race going down there on Saturday?
You know, I think it's going to come down to the wire, Chris. I think it's kind of a crazy race, actually. There's still a lot of undecided people I talk to and a lot of accusations. You know, big changes even today in the race as we go down to the wire. So I think it's going to be a fascinating race. I think Romney still has a solid footing here, if you will. But Santorum is nipping at his heels, and Gingrich is definitely nipping at his heels, especially with Perry's endorsement.
Well, let's take a look at something the other day. We all know about it. You knew this is coming. Here's Mary Ann Gingrich talking to ABC about what happened with her and her then husband. Let's look at the tape and then I'll get your response.
You want me all to yourself. Callista doesn't care what I do.
What was he saying to you, you think?
He was asking to have an open marriage, and I refused.
He wanted an open marriage?
Yeah, I accept the fact that he has somebody else in his life.
And you said?
No. No. That is not a marriage.
Well, an unusual interview in any network. ABC did it. Do you think it's going to have an impact on the voters between now? It's coming in so late. Do you think it's going to have an impact on Saturday's voting?
You know, I think it will have an impact for some people. I don't know how much of an impact, because people, for the most part, already knew that Gingrich, was on his third wife. But I think that actually seeing one of his wives speaking about him in an unflattering manner has got to have an impact in some respect. It does call into question his character, certainly on the personal side. And, as a voter, I encourage people to look at both sides, the personal side. And if you're going to overcome somebody's moral failings or infidelities, you have to also look at where do they stand ideologically and how much does their rhetoric match their reality. And in my mind, Gingrich falls short on both fronts, so he wouldn't get my vote.
He wouldn't get your. Well, who's left for you?
Well, I think there's 4 people in the race. That leaves 3 more I'm still looking at down to the wire.
You haven't decided?
I am going to watch the debate tonight very carefully. I'm on my way there in a minute with my youngest son, Blake, and my second son, Landon. And I'm going to watch the race very carefully. I think this race has been very long on rhetoric and sensation and short on substance. And we have some good candidates running. I think all of them could beat Obama easily. I think the debate in our country is mostly surrounding the fiscal issues, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say tonight.
Why do you think people like Newt Gingrich bring up issues like food stamps in these discussions? I haven't heard that phrase in years, and all of a sudden it's all over the place with Newt talking about President Obama being the best food stamp president in history, and how people are going to... Let's take a look at this tape from a Newt Gingrich event yesterday, and I want you to get your thoughts on whether race is a factor the way Gingrich is talking in South Carolina. Let's listen.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for putting Mr. Juan Williams in his place the other night. His supposed question was totally ludicrous, and we support you.
Thank you very much. Why do you think, Mrs. Sanford, that the voters of South Carolina, at least those there, were cheering this comment by this woman, this regular woman, that Juan Williams of Fox News should be put in his place?
You know, I think that politicians can be known to pander to certain audiences or segments on certain issues, but so can pundits. And I think that the press likes to make issues sometimes about things where there are no issues. I mean, I, for one, live on the coast. My congressman is an African-American named Tim Scott, a Republican of whom I'm very proud. And my governor is an Indian-American woman named Nikki Haley, of whom I'm also very proud. So those were both people that were elected by the electorate here in South Carolina. So the notion that we have a racial electorate here in South Carolina is absurd and nonsense, and frankly, just, stirred up by people in the press. And I think that that's that's, you know, I think that people in general are sick of politics as usual, and part of that is they're sick of the press stirring things up with an angle. And you know what? I think that woman's right. People should be cheering.
Who in the press do you know has ever brought up the issue of food stamps, ever brought up the issue of how, as Rick Perry said the other day in that debate on Monday, that South Carolina is at war with the federal government, as is Texas, bringing up these old states' rights issues? The press doesn't bring them up. The candidates do.
Oh, I think the press brings up all sorts of things. I mean, I think that this race in particular is one, as I said, that's long on rhetoric and short on substance, long on the sensational, if you will. So, you know, we have 24/7 news these days, where we have just a proliferation of channels, each one seeking to find things that they can sensationalize. So, I mean, if you look hard enough at all these candidates, you can find all sorts of things to sensationalize.
Okay, let me ask you about Newt Gingrich. Last word. Do you think there's any way in which his behavior in his marriage will be reflected in his policies or his behavior if he's elected as president?
I think anybody's behavior in their personal life does have to impact what they do in their professional life, because I think it comes down to the simple question of character, and I think character matters. It matters in your family, it matters in your business, it matters in everything you do each day of your life. So, you know, does that mean that we can't overcome failings on one side? Absolutely not. I think the American people are actually fairly forgiving, but there has to be some notion, I think, if there are serious failings on one side, there has to be some notion that there's a very, very strong stance on the other side for me to overcome that.
Mrs. Sanford, please come back on the show when you want to. Give us a word. We'd like to hear from you. A strong voice out of South Carolina, Jenny Sanford, the former First Lady of the Palmetto State. Thanks for coming on tonight.